Hey Internet, I'm AustinBuddy, and today we're going to talk about how to use your Axe effects or your Axe 8 to get a classic Jimi Hendrix first album in London kind of sound. Before we get into programming exactly how you get Jimi Hendrix's sound with the Axe effects and the Axe 8, you need to really think about the input signal, which is really the guitar. And not every Strat's going to sound the same or necessarily sound right. I'll tell you what's worked for me. What I have here is a Fender Custom Shop. It's a Closet Classic 50th Anniversary 1964 Strat. And of all the Strats I've played, and I've played a lot, I really love this Strat. It really gets that Jimi Hendrix kind of vibe and tone. The way they wound the pickups, just the way the guitar plays. Hendrix used nickel strings. That's what everybody used back in the day. Today you can get steel strings or nickel-plated strings that are steel inside, and those tend to be bright. And nickel is a little bit mellower, and so that's an important thing. Let me just walk you through a preset here. Jimmy didn't have a lot of effects in London at the beginning. He had Fuzz Face, and he had the Octavia, but there really isn't that much wah, if any, on that first album. And so there's a couple of tricks to getting this sound, and I'll give you a little bit of taste of the sound. So you can tell that's pretty close to that kind of sound that he gets. Very Strat, some grit on it. So what we have here is we have two amps in the studio, and I did them in parallel. On an Axe 8, you can just use one if you want. But these are the British JM45s. The top one is just the regular JM45, and the bottom is the JMP45 with a jumped channel. And Jimmy would do this in the studio. He would use a couple of different amps, and Eddie Kramer would use different mics on them, and they would blend them at the console to get what they wanted. But there are a couple of setting tricks to these amps to get that kind of sound without overdoing it that I'll sort of show you here. One of the things I've done, I like to do this, is I like to hook the gain up to a pedal. In my case, it's external 4, and set a high and a low gain, and then I can kind of control what the amp is doing if I need it to go really, really hot or not. So I'm going to sort of show you what happens here. So this is on 5, just 5 gain. Now I'm going to move my pedal down, so you can hear how it thickens up a lot. And now when I go all the way down, I'm in this sort of kind of territory. And just by backing off the gain, I clean it up pretty nice for, like, you know. So, a couple of the settings here that I've done to custom this amp to what I need. It's a very bassy amp, and you can see that I've got the bass still up at 4.3, but I did do the cut, because you remember, this was going through a board and was mixed for a record, so it's not like it had a lot of 100K or below that on it. So you can do that. And then Jimmy would sort of crank these in the studio, supposedly. I mean, he varied his amps a lot. I left the bright switch on, but he was up at 9 and roughly on the mids and the treble, and also on the presence. That gives it that extra sort of crunch and kind of in-your-ear trebly stuff. Yet we've still got bottom to it. That's the fascinating thing about it. But here's a couple other little things that you may not be thinking about when you do this. So these advanced amp pages, I just do a couple little tweaks. So the first one I do is I like to go to the preamp dynamics, and I like to add a little bit to it because I'm a touch player, and I like that the amp to respond to how hard or soft I touch it. You can go all the way up to a 1.0. I just go to 0.5 here, but that's one thing that I do change. I leave everything else alone on this page. On the speaker drive page, this one doesn't have any speaker drive in it. That's sort of a new cliff thing, but it could easily be 1. It'll reduce the sound just a little bit, but not too much, 1.5, because if it's really loud, that's what you get. So not a material change. On the speaker, I leave most of this alone. Sometimes, though, in this particular one, notice that I have the transformer match down a little bit. That, instead of being a 1, that really can open the sound up a little bit more. And when I use 2 of the amps in parallel, I kind of like doing that, leaving one sort of normal and then just changing the other one just a little bit for a subtle thing. On power supply, the only thing I change here is I do a 50 AC line frequency, which is actually what Europe would have been in London at the time. They have different power systems there, so it's a little minor thing. You probably can't hear it, but I do that. And then this is important. I changed the power tube type to KT88s. That's not the default tube in the JTM 45s, but it is what Jimmy would have used in London for that new amp at the time, would have been KT88s. So you do want to put that, select that from here. Preamp, you know, I could pick other things, but this is the EC883 is what you really want to do for that. I don't fool with the tone stack or any of these things. That's all stock. And then this is a real big part of it. You have to remember Eddie Kramer was at the board doing things here. I love this EQ, and I actually like the 5-band passive best. But for this one, I like to just roll off about 4 dB at 4K. And that really kind of helps take some, it's still a very bright amp, but it takes some of the harshness out and makes it sit in a mix. You're not now competing with cymbals or maybe some of the snare high overtones and stuff. It's still there, but that really is a big secret in terms of working these 2 amps. Now, if we go to the other JTM 45, the one that's jumpered, you're going to see similar settings here. I've got the normal drive at 5 default, same kind of, I've got the exact same curve that I did on the other one. Actually, it's not the same. I've got the drive set a little bit lower, so it starts at 3 here rather than 5, 3.5, and then goes up to 8. So that's just another little sort of thing, and I sort of affect the scale. But these are pretty close to what the other one was. It's a little darker by design, but you'll still see me pulling out all the bottom on this one. I just did all the bottom because this is a heavier bottom JM P amp. And I did the 4K, took it out here. Preamps, the same stuff as the other one. Power amps, KT88. Power supplies at 50. I didn't change any of the speaker drive stuff. There, the transformer matches at 1. Speaker drive is already 1.53 here, and dynamics at that. So that gives you kind of the amp front end sound together. You can argue about whether you need 2 amps or not, but to me it works. And then to add to this, you can hear it in the sound. I've got a small room reverb. And I set the time to 0.72, and I mixed it at about 15%. It's a little less than what the normal one is, because that room mic is a real big part of Jimmy's sound. There's just a little bit there when I play. Just a little bit. You can add it a little more if you want, but it's really in the records if you listen to it. There's a room mic that Eddie blends into the overall thing. Now, I'm going to have to go to a different video here because another huge part of the secret of the sound is the cabinet, which is a blend of 4 different mics. This is the cab I've made. I'm going to show you how to do it separately. But in this particular block, I want you to see I've cut out everything under 100 hertz and pretty much everything over at 9.6. So remember, this guitar still sounds very bright. But, you know, if you cut everything over 10, you're not getting anything else there. I have a slight boost on it. I don't know why. It just sounds better to me. I am using the vintage preamp type. This is not available in the Axe 8, but just for a little bit. I'm not driving it very much. A little saturation. I don't have any of the room mic stuff on here, but just a little bit because that's really what it would have been going into the console. We're going to go to a cab lab video, and I'm going to show you how to mix this cab. This is a great cab. I have shared this recipe with others. I know for a fact that Dweezil Zappa has used it in the past. I don't know if he's using it right now. But this is sort of the early greenbacks 12Ms. And I got this from a Red Wires pack. So we'll switch to that in a minute. But before we go there, let me show you the other pieces of this. Now, I've got a fuzz face on this. Germanium here, clip type. I've got it at about 7 overall level, and I've got the mix a little under because I just like a little bit of attack coming through. And I took all the low cut, I just brought it all the way down. I like a little low, and then I just boost the mid just slightly by 1 dB that's set. That's the default. And I've got the tone kind of up. And then I also put the drive on this where I can switch it up a curve. I'm not using a pedal to do it, although I could. I've got it switched to one of my switches on my MFC will actually change it. I could do it a couple of different ways, but the reason I do that is it really gives it a different sound. So let me show you what it sounds like right now. It's just only 2 drive, okay? So I'm going to switch it on. So let's see, it should be on. Okay, so now we've got some of this fuzz. Just kind of thickening things up a little bit. And in a real fuzz, when you roll it off a little bit with your volume, it cleans up. And it does so pretty good on the Axe Effects. I will tell you a real fuzz does it better because the Axe Effects actually has a buffer in front of the fuzz, and that's kind of something you don't want to do. It's just the way the Axe Effects is wired. It's not a default with it. So that's just at 2.5, and if I take it off, and then back on, fuzz is a big part of his sound. Now I'm going to kick in the higher gain part of the fuzz. It's saturating now. Now there's no octave on that. That's just the fuzz up loud. Giving it a lot of sustain because this preamp, the 7 level, is really boosting the signal going into the 2 Marshall amps coming out of it. And that really makes the amp overdrive as well. So, but it can be a little too thick, I found, and I kind of like it a little bit at a lower volume. Now on this particular drive, on the Y setting, I've got the Octaver, and this is a Tycho Brahe Octava type circuit, and it sounds usually better on the neck pickup, so. Drive off now. We're back to regular amp. And I just love that sound, just like that, just that clean sound. And again, that's on the low gain, so. We do that. Love that kind of sound, so it's kind of fun. All right, so we're also missing a little bit of some backward stuff. So you can get a reverse delay in here and get to the mix all the way up like that. So that's kind of cool to have that in there because there was a little reverse stuff going on in London. And then if you like the Red House sort of sound, you know, you can do this. So this is more of a stereo tape. And all I've done here is stereo tape. Really, probably was a mono back then, but it's about 313 milliseconds. Basically, it's time to the beat right here at beats per minute at a quarter, a dotted eighth note, which tends to be a very good setting for this kind of thing. So the secret to mixing this particular cab is you need the right cab IRs, and that's half the sound. So I use these red wires, big box, for this particular sound. It's a 1968 Marshall basket weave Celestion G12 M20s greenbacks library. It's only $9 for it. They give you a lot of different mics choices and placement choices, and so you need to get those if you want to make this IR and get this part of the sound, because this is really a key part of it. I found that not just any greenbacks will do, and I'll show you why. I've opened up over here Cab Lab 3, and I have loaded 4 different mics into Cab Lab 3 right now into the mixer. And the first one is a M160, and this is on the cap edge, basically, probably 2 inches away. That's the first mic. The second mic is a 421, a Sennheiser, and this was on the cone, probably about 1 inch away. And the third one is an SM57 on the cap off axis, more than likely, maybe on the cone. You can try and see which one you like best. And the last one is a room mic. Now you can use a U87 or a U67, but 10 to 12 feet away, room mic's really important. And Eddie Kramer would, the great engineer and producer mixer for Jimmy's stuff, would set these mics up on his 4x12s back in the time, and then he would change the levels from the faders on the board. So roughly here it's about -3 for the 421, and this one's only about, and you can see the curve changing over to the right, this area. When I move the faders, you can see how it changes. This one's probably about -10, and he would leave the room mic the same level as the M160. So that's how you get the other half of the sound. It's very, very important.